Hello, I am back with another Rapunzel wig tutorial, this time using some different techniques and also featuring a detachable braid. Alright, let's get started. First off, we're going to need some braiding hair. I use 6 packs of braiding hair that are 82 inches long. I usually get my braiding hair off of Amazon or eBay, or if I'm lucky, I can even find the color that I need at my local wig shops. And most importantly, we're going to need zip ties and a lot of them. When I'm making my braids, I try to find a place that I can hang the braid up so it's easier to work with. I'll usually do this outside as well because braiding hair can be very messy. Now, after I take the braid out of the package, I'll begin unbraiding it because it does come already braided, but not in the braid that we want. And I'm going to brush it out and fold it somewhat lopsided. And I'm going to do this with each braid, and that makes it so it kind of tapers down at the end of the braid. So it starts off really thick and then it'll get nice and small at the bottom. And here you can see me testing the length of the braid because of course we don't want it too long. Now, once I have 2 completed strands out of the pack, I'm going to put them together to make one of the 3 strands. So remember, I'm starting with 6 packs, so each strand of the braid is going to have 2 packs in it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a zip tie and I'm going to zip tie it as tight as I can at the top of this strand, at the top of the fold. And when I say as tight as you can, I mean pull that sucker to as many clicks as it can and then one more click. Of course, we're going to repeat that process for the other 2 strands. And once we have all 3 strands, we are going to get one more zip tie, and we're going to zip tie the 3 strands together at the top, not quite around the fold, but around the braid as a whole, so that way we have a nice loop at the top of the braid. And once again, you can see me pulling those zip ties as tight as I can. That's going to be very important because braiding hair is entirely loose hair. So the tighter you pull these zip ties, the less likely these braids are going to shed and come apart. Now we have the 3 strands, but it's not quite time to do the big braid yet. So we are going to separate 2 strands and secure them and put them off to the side as we are going to start braiding the little braids that are within the big braid. My goodness, were my fingers sore after doing these little braids. But you're gonna very carefully pull apart one strand from this bigger strands, and then separate that little strand into 3 littler strands to do these little braids. Even though the braiding hair does say that this is tangle free, it does get tangled very easily, so make sure that you are separating the strands after each twist that you do. You can see me pulling the hair down to make sure that it doesn't tangle at the bottom of these braids. Once you get the braid all the way braided, you're going to secure it with an elastic, and you are going to repeat that process for the other 2 strands. Of course, you can have only 2 little braids. You can have as many little braids as you want. I like to have 1 little braid per strand. I think that looks best. And now that we have all of the little braids done, we get to start on the big braid. So I am taking off those elastics that I had, separating the other strands, and we get to start braiding our braid. I'm making sure that the little braids that we just spent so much time on are facing outwards when I braid, so that way you can actually see them and they're not hidden behind the braid. And once I finish braiding this monstrosity, I am going to secure it with a zip tie. That's right. This is the last thing that we ever want to come undone. So we're doing a zip tie, and then it'll be concealed with flowers later. And here you can see how it looks compared to me. You can see how big and thick and beautiful it is. Now we just spent all that time making the braid, so we want to make sure that it's protected. This is going to be a little different than the method that I used in my previous Rapunzel Wig tutorial. I'm going to lay tulle out on the ground, and I'm going to sew a tube around the entire braid. Unlike having a tube around each individual strand, this is going to be just one big tube that is going to be hand sewn over the braid. So here I'm just trimming the tulle down to size so it fits, as well as trimming all of those zip tie ends. Next, I'm going to thread a needle with a thread that somewhat matches the color of the hair. It won't matter too much because this is the back of the braid, but it never hurts to have matching thread. And I'm going to do just a super easy loop stitch to close the tulle together. It doesn't have to be anything super sturdy. I've never had an issue with the thread breaking in the back. Just something to get the tulle closed that doesn't take hours and hours. And again, this is going to give you a nice seam along the back. Of course, this is the back of the braid, so you're never really going to see this part. You'll also have your braid pillow back here that'll cover up most of this seam. If you think it'll ever be an issue, you can definitely add flowers over it, but I have never seen the seam in any of the pictures that I've taken as Rapunzel. I use felt for my braid pillows. It's cheap and really easy to replace if it ever rips or gets dirty. I have never had any issues with it, and you can sew whatever way you choose to attach the braid to your dress onto the felt, and it's super, super easy. And I'm going to attach it to the braid with a similar stitch to how I closed the tulle. So I'm just going to do that loop stitch around both sides of the felt. I've never had an issue with it falling off, so it's, again, doesn't have to be anything really sturdy, and it always lasts a really long time too. Next, I'm going to sew this rectangle of fabric. I have it being a mix of felt and similar colored cotton, and I'm just going to turn it inside out. Now, this has to be long enough that it can wrap around the loop that we made earlier on our braid, which is going to be right at the top that you can see sitting on my legs here. So make sure that you measure that out before you start sewing, because it does have to be long enough to loop through and hold the snaps that are going to hook onto the braid. And then just run it through your sewing machine and you have this nice sealed section on your braid. I am using gold sew-on snaps for this wig today. Two halves of them are going to go onto the braid, and we're going to set that aside for later. For now, I'm going to show you how to attach the snaps onto the base wig. I'm going to cut the hair that is on the base part right here on the wig. I'm going to cut all the hair and wefts off of that on the outside of the wig, so that way I can sew the snaps on nice and easily and not have to deal with hair getting stuck within the thread. And once I have that hair cut off, I'm just going to throw that in the garbage, and we're going to hand sew one half of the snaps onto the wig and the other half onto the braid. And once everything is sewn on, you can see how easy it is to just snap those two pieces together and have a detachable braid.
Is that when people see the show, they will understand what it was that we were going to do. But critics have essentially responded, yeah, like what? Making a ton of money. But hey, that's a story, and with this, I'd love to know your thoughts, whether it be on the show or this crazy situation going on behind the scenes. But from that, I want to take a second to thank the fantastic sponsor of today's show, Squarespace.
Now on to the fun part, we get to style the base wig. So I am using 1-inch mesh wire rollers, and I am rolling the hair in the direction that I want the hair to go. So I wanted to have some volume at the front, so I'm putting one roller just past the hairline, rolled back, and then I'm going to have some other rollers following that direction so we get that nice swoop for her bangs. The second roller is going to also be rolled back in the same direction that the roller just was, and this one's going to be directly behind the roller that we just placed. This third roller is going to be rolled away from the rollers that we just placed, so it's going to be rolling to what would be the left of this wig. You can see me rolling it under, and then it's going to be placed sideways from the rollers that we just put on. The fourth roller is going to be rolled in the same direction that our last roller was, and it's going to be placed right next to it. And our last roller is going to be placed on the other side of our first and second rollers, being rolled away from those first rollers. Now that those are set into place, we're going to brush out the ends of the wig, and we're going to create this almost zigzag part in the back of the wig. And the purpose of this is to just hide the wefts of the wig. If you were to split a wig right down the middle, you would see the wefts of the wig and it wouldn't look very natural. So you can see me brushing parts to the side, pulling parts underneath, and you'll see in just a second what that looks like once it's fully separated. Secure one half of the hair out of the way, and we're going to braid one side of the wig. Now, some people prefer to do Dutch braids for Rapunzel. I have always found more success doing French braids for her, so that's what I'm going to be doing in this tutorial. If, of course, you find Dutch braids easier, then by all means do that. It's just a different direction that you braid the hair. Not too much of a difference there. But I'm going to start braiding that hair, and I'm going to braid it all the way to the end of the hair, and I'm going to secure it with an elastic afterwards. Once you have the braid secured, you can go back and kind of pull the sides of the braid out a little bit to give it a little more volume and a little more draping to the side of the face. Repeat the braid on the other side. So now we have two French braided halves, and what we're going to do is we're going to tuck the braids underneath each other. So I fold the end of the braid so I have almost a guider to go through the hair. You'll kind of feel it. When you pull the braids up, there's a nice space that you can tuck the braids into, and you can kind of see how I do that. The second braid will be a little bit harder to tuck in, as you won't be able to pull it up to get it under, but still fold the end of that braid under and just kind of feed it underneath the other braid. Now back to those zip ties again. This time I'm using smaller zip ties, and you're gonna just kind of feel into the hair, and you're gonna basically zip tie the braid that's tucked underneath to the wefts of the hair, so that way it gives it some security and you won't have to worry about the braids kind of falling out of each other. I'll add a few to connect the two braids that are crossed over each other, but this really just gives it some security so you don't have to worry about the braids falling out. Now I realize I completely forgot to show myself steaming these rollers, but you do need to hit them with some heat. We didn't just put them in rollers for funsies. So you need to hit them with a hair dryer or some steam, so that way they actually curl and get that volume that we need. And then we are going to cut these pieces. You can see me kind of measuring out how long I need the bangs to be. So it's a struggle when cutting wigs. You know, you can't go back if you make the wrong cut. A really great guide that I use when I am cutting into wigs is I'll actually look at Fairy Tale Wigs' bases and see how long those pieces are cut. And it gives me a good gauge as to how long I should be cutting my pieces. I am going to be using this fun product called Big Sexy Hair, and this is something that I learned from the Charmed Comb. This is a product that's just going to give your teasing something to hold on to, especially with new wigs when the fibers are so slick and hard to style. This is a really great product to make teasing your wigs a lot easier.
Not only are you fixing yourself, but you're also helping mankind.
And then the fun part of just teasing the heck out of these bangs. I face the brush towards me and brush back in really long, slow strokes. And that's going to give you that really nice cotton candy look to these bangs. The messier it looks, the more correct you are with teasing these. It's going to look very scary at first. Now, sometimes with these, when styling princess bangs, it takes more than one go at it. I think at this point I was at my 5th brush out and re-tease, which obviously I'm not going to show you. But here I am teasing it again, and finally the hair is starting to take the shape that I want. So I'm taking my fine tooth comb and I am brushing it out, smoothing it, and starting to shape the bangs into the style that I want.
I was a Scientologist for 46 years. I was the international spokesperson for Scientology for more than 20 years until I left in 2007. Senior Scientology official Mike Ringer. Mike Ringer is one Scientology's top leader. If I put one word to describe our efforts, it would be friend. Please welcome Mr. Mike Ringer. On my job, according According to Scientology policy, was to discredit and destroy critics who spoke out against the church. If the church believed that someone was an enemy and needed to be silenced or destroyed, it was my job, and I did it. People will argue are undoubtedly criminal. I've heard that. My biggest regret is that I caused 2 children to be born into and raised in Scientology. I effectively lost them because they're still there. They don't communicate with me.
And now we have that classic Rapunzel swoop to her hair. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting that last little strand that's just going to create a nice drape to the other side of the face, make it a little more even and not so heavy to the left side. If that helps, this is the strand that was in the last roller that we set. I just had that put off to the side so I could tease and brush it later. Now I'm securing a blonde hairnet over the back of the braids. This is so it prevents fraying and matting at the back of the hair, especially since this is where the braids is going to be clipping in and out. We just want this hair to last for as long as possible. So you can see me pinning the net into place, and then any flowers that we clip in are going to hide the seams of this net. Now we are almost there. You can see how beautiful she looks all clipped in. Now we're moving on to the flower portion, which can be as short or as long as you need it to be. You can add as many flowers as you like. It's really just up to creative freedom at this point as to how many flowers you want to add. So I've cut out little squares of felt, and I am hot gluing hairpins onto the felt. This is the best method that I've found with attaching flowers to hairpins. I've found it very difficult to attach the hairpins directly to the flowers. And this also gives you a good base if you want to make flower clips that have more than one flower on it.
If I can stop one, then I'm going to do it. Tell that make people understand how people get involved in Scientology, why they stay, why people disconnect from their children, to Mike's personal story.
And here's just an example of how I attach the flowers to the hairpins after the hairpins have dried, and a fun little example of what those hairpins could look like.
2007. Please welcome Mr. Mike Braiding.
Part of my job was to discredit and destroy critics who spoke out against the church. If the church believed that someone was an enemy and needed to be silenced or destroyed, it was my job and I did it. If I was told to follow someone, I made it happen. If I was told to discredit someone,
And then the incredibly fun part of just pinning the flowers on. I use the U wide bobby pins to attach the flowers to the braid because they stick through the tulle a little bit easier and they don't tear as much. And they just don't ruin the style. They don't risk it if they happen to fall out or anything. So just have so much fun with this part. This is my favorite part after I get all the flowers made, is just putting them onto the braid.
Interaction with her. She was in the nursery all day long. Kathy and I worked. We would see her for an hour a day, and then at the end of the night. The core belief of Scientology is that you are spiritual being. That you have lived many lives and you will live many lives. So your mother's really like your mother, and she's your mother this lifetime, you're going to have many lives. So they put very little significance on interpersonal relationships between family members. So the same with marriage. Scientology teaches that...
And we are all done with the wig after this point. So here she is, the entire wig. I've found that I really like this method of Rapunzel wigs right now. It's a little bit easier on the neck, and I find a little bit cheaper to make in the long run as well. So if you have any questions, please feel free to comment them down below, and I'd be more than happy to answer. Thank you so much, everyone.